So the Edge Sisters came together really sort of organically. Most of the women that are involved in the group I used to see at different events in the community. And every time we'd see each other, we would get into a conversation about the community. We all come from different backgrounds, we have different professional interests, different personal interests, but we really share one commonality, and that is what's best for the community. So a year ago, or a little more than that, we ended up getting together for dinner. We didn't have an agenda. We just gathered and said, let's see what comes of it. And of course, we're all pretty involved and energetic people, and we came out of that dinner saying, we've got to continue this. We ended up booking a couple more dinners, and they didn't happen. And that was because of the pandemic. So we switched all of our communication to weekly Zoom calls, and we've actually been doing that ever since then. The bottom line for us is this is just a group of friends. It's not an organized thing. It's not a club. It's not something you can join. We're committed together to working for the betterment of the community. And in doing that, we're committed also to deep diving ourselves amongst the group in our race work. So we're spending Saturdays literally together talking about race, talking about our vulnerabilities, talking about what matters to us, what experiences we've had. We laugh, we cry, we have moments of silence where we just absorb. And so we've been very fortunate to have each other during this time, and I hope that in some way, maybe that's an inspiration to other people in the community to gather and do the same thing. If you decide to do it, reach out to people you don't know very well. If you just stay in your group of friends, you might not grow and learn as much as you would if you reach out to somebody that maybe is an acquaintance or someone that hasn't had the same life experience as you. It's not hard to do, and you'll find a lot of camaraderie if you just be vulnerable and honest with each other and share what you have learned and experienced. Our beacon is the community, and we're going to continue to drive forward for change in our various ways to make sure that equity and opportunity for people who live in our region is provided to everybody.
As Sandy said, we came together because our conversations would consistently turn to the concept of community, how to start the conversation, and the work around the need for real and equitable change. And for the Black women in the Edge Sisters, the conversation would often turn to race and racism and the disparities that exist in education, health, wealth, housing, entrepreneurship, relationships, philanthropy, and more. You see, the greater Central Ohio region will not make significant gains on the economic and social indicators or truly fulfill its potential if Black, Indigenous, and peoples of color get left behind. If wide gaps and disparities go unaddressed, or if we continue to be dismissed or excluded, if systems and policies aren't adjusted, rectified, and dismantled. In our work together, we see and seek to understand how we can work through the biggest obstacles, race, racism, and racial disparities. These must be laid on the table and dealt with. Now, you may say, this sounds too hard, maybe it's someone else's job, or it's just too deep. But we reject that premise, and the Edge Sisters, Francie, Hannah, Jenny, Jane, Janelle, Lisa, Megan, Sandy, Stephanie, Sue, Tanny, Trudy, and me decided to do our own work, take our own journey, to develop our own accountability system of learning, trust, transparency, and action. This is personal to us, but we recognize personal growth will impact every aspect of our lives, including our community and other areas we lead. What can you do? Seek to challenge and educate yourself. Take a stand against racism. When you see something, say something. Diversify your own experiences and build authentic relationships with peoples of color. Be willing to change how you hold a space and show up. Look inward and act outward.
Look inward and act outward. I'm going to take this a little further than Christy did and talk openly about my own personal growth. Looking inward, I asked myself this question: am I complicit in creating a world that I do not want? I had never asked myself that or taken the time to really analyze my own behavior. I realize now, through my work with the Edge Sisters, that I have been and I am complicit in the world we live in today, and I have to change. I am changing. I recently heard a presentation by Dr. Robert Livingston. He's a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School and one of the nation's leading experts on the science of understanding bias and racism. He shared something that changed me, and I want to share it with you. Imagine a stream that flows out to the ocean. The stream has a current moving down and to the direction of the ocean. Now imagine you're a fish. There are fish fighting really hard to swim upstream, creating ripples and waves and working against the current so they don't get swept out to sea. There are also fish working really hard to swim faster. They go with the current to get out to the ocean quicker. Then there are the fish that are treading water. The fish treading water underestimate the tug of the current and end up going with the flow of the current out to sea. I swam upstream sometimes, but if I'm being completely transparent, there are many, many times I have been treading water and letting the current take me. As a result, I have been complicit in creating the world we live in today, and that's not okay. So now what? What do I do now? How am I going to change and swim against the current? I do believe change happens one conversation at a time. So the first thing I can do is take small moments and practice, and when I make mistakes, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to leave you with an example, one where I swam a little bit upstream, but I ask myself, could I have done more? My son plays hockey, and if you look at the teams, you will see many young white men and very few young men of color. This past year, I noticed this because the world is awake now, and with intentional focus, we can pay attention to these things. And I did one small thing. I called the mom of the new African-American hockey family, and I called her and welcomed her to the organization. And I offered to be helpful if she had any questions. That was one really, really small thing. It was a small step. And I've checked in a few times, but what else could I have done? The one thing I have learned is that the true opportunity lies in getting to know one another, understanding perspectives. I feel vulnerable sharing, but in retrospect, there are many things I could have done throughout the season. I could have arranged an intentional mentoring with an older player, with another African-American player. Another would be encouraging and funding diversity training to the administration or offering to provide that to the team. I am learning and changing, and I want to encourage you to learn and change right beside me. I've realized that it's not just figuring out what I can do, but it's about being willing to do it. I will end with a quote from a local author, Maggie Smith. Think about geologic time, how the slightest shifts, imperceptible daily, carve canyons and make mountains. Trust that you can make mountains move, even if you can't see it.